There was a time, or so the old storytellers whispered, when the gods did not gaze down from the heavens, but walked through the dust of the world beside humankind. In the sacred valley where obsidian glinted like night trapped within stone, the air shimmered with the breath of unseen powers. The Mexica believed that to live was to tread a narrow path shared with immortals whose tempers, desires, and hungers were far from divine perfection. They were magnificent and flawed, fierce and tender, and they built reality through sacrifice. The line between the living and the eternal was not a wall, but a mist, and through it every soul passed again and again, reborn through ritual and memory. Imagine standing before a temple rising from the earth like a mountain of red stone, its steps steep with the weight of ages. The drums echo like heartbeats from a time before the sun, and incense curls into the sky like a promise the wind will never forget. The people gather, their faces painted in ochre and black, their eyes lifted toward the burning horizon where gods once fell to earth in flames. They do not pray with words alone, but with blood, dance, and silence. The myth is alive not in the heavens, but here, in the trembling of the ground beneath their feet. Before we venture deeper into this forgotten world, take a moment to breathe its air. Let the dust of Teotihuacan settle in your thoughts, and the whispers of old myths awaken curiosity. And if stories like this stir something within you, a spark of wonder in the night, make sure to follow and subscribe to Boring Bedtime Stories, where ancient dreams find their voice once more. Tell me too, from where do you listen to these echoes of the past? Share it in the comments below, and let the circle of stories widen beyond time. The creation myths of the Aztecs do not begin with silence, they begin with conflict. In the beginning, the universe was not born from nothing but fought into existence. 4 suns had risen and fallen before the world you know came to be. Each age was ruled by a god and destroyed by his weakness or pride. The son of jaguars devoured the first men, the son of wind scattered them as dust, the son of fire burned their bones, and the son of water drowned the last of their kind in serpentine torrents. The gods looked upon their ruined works and despaired, but they were not finished. It was in the eternal darkness, after the 4th sun's death, that the gods gathered at Teotihuacan, the city where divinity itself was born. They sat around a sacred fire that would one day ignite the heavens. The proud god Tecuchistecatl, shining and vain, was chosen to jump first into the flames and become the new sun. Yet he hesitated, trembling as the fire's roar grew louder. Beside him stood Nanahuatzin, the humble one, covered in sores and clothed in rags. Without a word, Nanahuatzin leapt into the fire, and the flames embraced him. Out of light's womb, the 5th sun was born, the world we live in. But the story did not end with creation. The other gods saw the sun rising, but motionless in the sky. It hung there, glowing but still. Then they realized that for the heavens to turn, for the sun to move, sacrifice was required, not from mortals, but from the gods themselves. One by one, they offered their blood to the newborn light, and only then did the wheel of time begin to turn. Thus the Aztecs came to believe that every dawn was a payment due, a debt to sustain the universe itself. Without offering, the world would stop. Without reverence, the sun would die. The Aztec world was never about paradise. It was about balance. Life existed only because death was willing to feed it. The rain fell because something of equal worth rose to the clouds in return. Across their temples, these truths were carved not as allegories, but as agreements, a cosmic contract between gods and men. In the heart of Tenochtitlan, the great city that glittered on water, stood the Templo Mayor, where this eternal covenant was renewed day after day. Here, blood watered the stones so that maize could rise from the earth, and voices lifted in chant so that the stars might continue their dance. To modern ears, such beliefs can sound cruel, distant, unimaginable. Yet for the Aztecs, sacrifice was not savagery, but sustenance. They saw themselves as caretakers of divine energy, entrusted with maintaining equilibrium in a world built upon fragility. Every human heartbeat was a part of the great rhythm of existence, an echo of the pulse that began when the gods bled themselves for the fifth sun. Theirs was a world where holiness was not gentle but fierce, where faith was forged in endurance. Among these beliefs, one mystery remains: the moments when mortals claimed to see the gods walking among them. It was said that Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, appeared as a warrior wrapped in black obsidian, his eyes churning like liquid night. Others spoke of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, who descended from the east, carrying the wisdom of creation itself. These were not distant deities, but presences that shaped destiny. To encounter them was to face the truth that power and ruin were twins. Imagine the night before the Festival of the Sun. Torches line the causeways, their flames mirrored on the canal's surface. Priests painted with ashen feathers raise their arms to the unfolding sky. The people chant names too sacred to repeat aloud, names that transform breath into meaning. It is not only ceremony, it is memory reborn. To look into the obsidian mirror is to see reflected the same fear and wonder that once filled the hearts of those who danced by the temple's fire. And yet, beneath all the grandeur, there was tenderness in their myths. The mother goddess Coatlicue wept for her children even as she consumed them in cycles of renewal. The rain god Tlaloc mourned as much as he blessed. The serpent Quetzalcoatl fell not from malice but from sorrow, deceived and heartbroken. Their stories reveal the humanity of the divine, and through it, the divinity of humankind. The Aztecs did not separate the sacred from the flawed. They believed both were necessary to keep the universe alive. If you listen closely, you can almost hear their voices echoing through the ruins. The wind that moves over the stones still carries traces of ancient hymns, recited by tongues now turned to dust. Each legend, each god, each offering is not a relic, but a reminder that what we believe can shape the very motion of the sun. The stars above Mexico still trace the paths of stories older than memory, waiting for those willing to remember. We begin then, not with endings, but with openings. This is a journey through the shadows of time, through myths buried beneath conquest and silence. In the chapters to come, we will awaken the forgotten gods, Tezcatlipoca, Quetzalcoatl, Tlaloc, Coatlicue, and uncover the meaning hidden in their stories. We will walk through the underworld and return, just as the ancients believed every soul must. The gates of myth are open. Step through them now and carry a spark of their eternal fire with you. Before there was day or night, before the stars found their places in the heavens, there was only darkness and the weight of unfinished worlds. The Aztec storytellers said that the universe was not created in a single act, but forged through destruction and rebirth. 4 suns had already shone and perished, each ruled by a god whose virtues and flaws shaped the life beneath their light. The cosmos, restless and cyclical, demanded not permanence, but movement. For nothing in their mythology could exist without death making way for new life. The coming of the 5th sun was not destiny. It was sacrifice written into the bones of creation. In the time before the current world, the gods gathered at Teotihuacan, the place where they themselves had been born. The city lay still and silent, its pyramids like sleeping giants under a dark sky. The celestial fire that would ignite existence waited at the center of this gathering, a flame that would choose who among them was worthy to bear the weight of the sun. Every god felt the calling, but none could escape the fear that the light demanded a price few were willing to pay. For to become the sun was to burn forever, to surrender form and self beneath the burden of life itself. Among those assembled was Tecuchistecatl, a god of wealth and brilliance, adorned in jade and quetzal feathers. His pride gleamed brighter than the gold that draped his arms. Standing beside him was Nanahuatzin, the humble one, scarred and covered in sores, clothed only in humility and devotion. It was said that the gods tested not strength but spirit, for the world's light could only be reborn through courage untainted by vanity. From the first flickers of the sacred fire, their fates began to divide. Days turned into nights, and the gods prepared their offerings. Tecuhtlicue built his altar of emerald and turquoise, decorated with shells and the bones of birds that touched the sky. Nanahuatzin, with trembling hands, gathered simple reeds and drops of his own blood, given freely to the flame. When the moment of truth arrived, silence swallowed the world. The priests who later recited the story said that even the stars paused in their motion, waiting to see which god would cast himself first into eternity. Tecuhtlicue approached the fire, his jeweled robes fluttering in the wind, but the heat roared like a living beast, and he faltered. He tried again and again, only to retreat, his courage turning to ash upon his lips. Then, without a sound, Nanahuatzin stepped forward. He took one breath, a final look at the assembled gods, and leaped into the flames. The fire did not consume him, it transformed him. Blinding light erupted from the heart of the darkness, and a new sun rose above the horizon, heralding the dawn of the fifth age. Yet Tecuhtlicue, shamed by his fear, refused to remain in shadow. In desperate pride, he too jumped into the fading embers, and from that act the moon was born, pale and cold, forever trailing behind the sun it had sought to surpass. The gods saw his arrogance and hurled a rabbit into his face, dimming his light forever as punishment for his vanity. Thus the heavens were balanced again. Light and shadow, day and night, pride and humility, forever chasing one another across the sky. But creation was unfinished. The new sun hung motionless, brilliant yet unmoving. Its light bathed the gods, but the world below remained still, inert. Alarms spread across the divine assembly. Had their sacrifice failed? Then one god, Xolotl, the twin of Quetzalcoatl, understood what was required. The sun demanded life to move, not symbolically, but through the ultimate offering, the gods themselves. And so, one by one, they opened their chests and bled into the earth. The ground drank their essence, the air trembled, and the sun began its eternal course through the firmament. Through divine death, motion was born. This moment, the creation of the fifth sun, was more than a tale. It was the cosmic foundation of Aztec belief. From then on, every sunrise reminded humankind of the god's sacrifice, and every offering from mortal hands was a promise to keep that light alive. Their rituals were not acts of fear, but acts of gratitude. The people gave blood so that the sun might journey across the sky, for if it stopped, all worlds would crumble into darkness once more. To understand this myth is to understand the Aztec soul. Life, to them, was a debt that could never be fully repaid. Each generation inherited the wound of creation, the knowledge that the world was purchased with divine suffering. They honored that truth through acts of offering, some gentle, some terrible, each performed under the belief that the balance of existence depended on their devotion. It was a worldview at once haunting and transcendent, binding gods and humans in a cycle neither could escape. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, played a secret part in this rebirth as well. When the first dawn broke, he descended from the heavens to retrieve the bones of ancient humanity from the underworld. He gathered what was left of the species, drowned in the great floods of the fourth sun, and coated their remains with his own blood. From that sacred mixture, he molded new life, giving mortals not only physical form, but spirit, a fragment of godly essence meant to remember its origins. In every pulse of a human heart, the Aztecs believed, echoed the rhythm of Quetzalcoatl's sacrifice. This is why the temples rose so high, why their steps reached toward the burning sky. They were not mere monuments of stone, but living altars replicating the moment of cosmic balance. The priests, standing upon those heights, mirrored Nanahuatzin's courage and Quetzalcoatl's generosity each time they offered the lifeblood of the people. Every drop spilled under the sun was a reflection of that first divine act. In this sacred exchange lay the assurance that the universe would continue its grand rotation. Yet even as the fifth sun blazed with vitality, the Aztecs knew it too would one day die. Their prophecies spoke of an ending written into the stars, an inevitable collapse of everything that lived under this age's light. The earth would quake, the heavens would crumble, and darkness would consume the sun once again. But until that day, every breath, every heartbeat, every ritual was a defiance of that promise of doom. It was their way of saying, "We remember and we endure." For them, time was not linear. It was a serpent devouring its own tail, endlessly reborn, endlessly dying. The fifth sun was only one chapter in an infinite cycle of suns, each carrying the memories of those that came before. Existence itself became a dance of fire and shadow, where the act of living was indistinguishable from the act of worship. The Aztecs found beauty not in permanence, but in the courage to keep creating when they knew all would one day fall. The story of the fifth sun teaches that light is never free. It demands offering, humility, and remembrance. It asks those who benefit from its warmth to give something back, even if it is only acknowledgement of the sacrifices that sustain it. Perhaps that is why this myth still resonates across time. It speaks to the universal truth that creation, in any form, art, love, or life itself, always costs something of the creator. When dawn stretches across modern Mexico and the first rays strike the ancient stones of Teotihuacan, it feels almost as if Nanahuatzin's fire still burns within those pyramids. The sunlight warms the same paths once walked by kings, priests, and believers who lifted their voices in gratitude to a sun that demanded everything. And in that moment, past and present blur. The fifth sun lives not just in the sky, but within every act of endurance, every breath of hope. We too move because something greater once gave of itself so we could find our way through the dark. In the realm of Aztec gods, few beings inspire as much awe and fear as Tezcatlipoca, the lord of obsidian and smoke. His name means the smoking mirror, a symbol as beautiful as it is foreboding. He is the god of night, deception, and destiny, a force that dwells not in chaos alone, but in the balance between creation and destruction. To the Aztecs, Tezcatlipoca was not simply a villain or a hero. He was the reflection of truth itself, a mirror into which mortals and gods alike feared to stare. For whoever looked upon his face saw not what they wished to see, but what truly was. In ancient tales, Tezcatlipoca's presence was heralded by the gleam of polished obsidian, dark glass that reflected the soul more than the body. Priests would gaze into these mirrors to seek visions, but what they found was never certain. The smoking mirror showed not the future alone, but the hidden paths of desire, envy, and ambition. It revealed the fragile threads of fate that tied mortals to the divine. To look into Tezcatlipoca's mirror was to face the vastness of possibility and the inevitability of consequence. Unlike many gods, Tezcatlipoca was ever-changing. He could be warrior or trickster, creator or destroyer, the voice of wisdom or madness. His power was the power of contradiction, a reminder that order cannot exist without its shadow. Legends speak of how he once strode beside Quetzalcoatl, the radiant feathered serpent, as a brother in the shaping of worlds. Together they balanced wisdom and will. Quetzalcoatl built and Tezcatlipoca tested. Where one dreamed of perfection, the other demanded reality. Their rivalry became both an eternal conflict and an eternal partnership. The story is said to begin in the First Age, the era of the Son of Jaguars. Tezcatlipoca ruled this world as its master, until Quetzalcoatl struck him down and cast him into the sky. As he fell, Tezcatlipoca became a jaguar, his growls echoing as thunder across the heavens. In revenge, he summoned his monstrous children to devour that world, ending the age in teeth and blood. It was the first of many cosmic endings shaped by their struggle. Where others sought stability, these divine twins found truth in the eternal dance of rise and fall. To the Aztecs, this story was not just myth, it was explanation. The night devours day because Tezcatlipoca still hunts it. Fortune fades into failure because his mirror still gleams in the corner of every human desire. He was the ever-watching presence behind ambition, the whisper that reminds every heart that its victories are fragile. The people feared him, yet they revered him, for his chaos ensured balance. Without his trials, humanity would remain weak, untested, blind to its own potential. From the heavens, Tezcatlipoca carried with him 4 great aspects, each representing the forces he commanded. He was Lord of the North, Master of Night's Breath. He was the invisible wind that moved through the streets of Tenochtitlan, unseen but ever near. His mirror, polished obsidian smoke, hung from his chest, swirling with visions of all that would come to pass. It was said that he could see every man's future just by inhaling the scent of his heart. Yet even he, with such divine clarity, never claimed to rule fate, only to reveal it. In the temples dedicated to his name, obsidian mirrors were placed within chambers of silence. There, priests sought communion with him through dreams and trance. Offerings of tobacco, feathers, and blackened maize were made at his altar, their smoke feeding the god's unseen form. To glimpse him was to feel both dread and recognition, for he was the embodiment of humanity's reflection, its ambition, deceit, pride, and sorrow. He did not promise hope, but truth, and for the Aztecs, that truth was sacred. Yet Tezcatlipoca was also known for his cruel games. One of the most famous tells of his trick against Quetzalcoatl, a tale of downfall and shame. In the time when Quetzalcoatl ruled as benevolent priest-king of Tolan, Tezcatlipoca grew jealous of his wisdom and peace. Appearing as a humble old man, he brought the feathered serpent a potion made from pulque, sweet and strong. He told him it was a drink of clarity, but Tezcatlipoca's gifts were rarely what they seemed. Quetzalcoatl drank, fell into drunkenness, and in his weakness, lost the purity that had defined him. When he awoke, the mirror was before him, and he saw himself as fallen. Consumed by shame, he fled into exile, leaving Tolan to crumble. The story is not simply about deceit, it is about the burden of self-awareness. Through Tezcatlipoca's mirror, Quetzalcoatl saw that even divine beings cannot escape imperfection. The smoking mirror did not merely destroy, it revealed. He forced gods and men to face their limitations, to see their virtues as potential vices when carried too far. To look upon him was to realize the duality of existence. There can be no creation without destruction, no purity without temptation. The feathered serpent's fall was not punishment, it was enlightenment wrapped in pain. Such myths made Tezcatlipoca both feared and worshipped. His influence lingered in every shadow, in the smoke of copal rising from the altars, in the quick flicker of jealousy in a friend's eyes. Lovers invoked him to preserve fidelity, warriors to grant strength, rulers to test their worth. For those who worshipped him with true reverence, he was neither merciless nor kind. He was simply necessary. Through his trials, the Aztecs believed, one found the measure of their soul. During the great festival of Toxcatl, his presence came to life in human form. Each year, a young man of flawless beauty was chosen to embody Tezcatlipoca for an entire cycle of seasons. He lived as a living god, dressed in precious clothes, attended by maidens, honored in ceremonies. Yet he knew his fate. When the festival returned, he would climb the temple steps, break his flutes, and offer his own blood to the god he represented. The people watched in awe, understanding that in his death, beauty and power fulfilled their purpose. The man became a reflection of Tezcatlipoca's law. All glory is temporary, and all perfection demands sacrifice. Beneath the cruelty of this ritual lay profound philosophy. The Aztecs did not worship suffering, but transformation. The smoking mirror is not only a symbol of doom, but of awakening, It teaches that through failure comes understanding, through pain comes clarity. For Tezcatlipoca, enlightenment is not peace, it is confrontation. It is looking into the mirror and seeing both beauty and terror in the same face, knowing they are one. In the obsidian depth of his domain, he continues to challenge and mock those who claim certainty. The universe, to him, is a game without winners, only lessons repeated across ages. Even the gods, he reminds us, are players on the same board, subject to the same spiral of rise and fall. His laughter, they say, is the wind that howls between mountain peaks, shaking the temples that men built in arrogance. His silence is the darkness that comes after revelation, the calm that forces reflection. Tezcatlipoca's mirror still gleams in modern times, though most no longer recognize it. It exists in every act of self-doubt, every moment of clarity after pride's collapse. When people face their reflection and find truths they would rather bury, they meet the smoking mirror anew. His legend endures not as memory, but as metaphor, a timeless reminder that power without humility is self-destruction, and that even light must cast a shadow to exist. In his darkness, there is balance. In his cruelty, wisdom. To encounter Tezcatlipoca is to stand before the truth that the gods themselves cannot outrun what they have created. The mirror waits for all who live and choose, and when we dare to look, we find perhaps not a god staring back, but ourselves. Before the first dawn burned across the heavens, before the winds carried names or prayers, there was a whisper of feathers against shadow. That whisper belonged to Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, the god who bridged the sky and the earth. His name carries the union of opposites: Quetzali, the resplendent feather of paradise, and Coatl, the serpent, creature of dust and soil. In him, the Aztecs saw the perfect balance of heaven and matter, spirit and flesh. He was both the dreamer who reached for the stars and the being who crawled upon the ground to bring light to humankind. Quetzalcoatl's story is one of creation and fall, wisdom and exile. He was the god of wind, learning, fertility and renewal, a bringer of art and law, the patron of priests and poets. Yet beneath that brilliance lies tragedy, a god undone not by jealousy or battle, but by doubt and sorrow. His legend stands as one of the most human among the divine tales of the Aztecs, for his flaws are mirrors of our own. To understand him is to glimpse the beauty and fragility of divine purpose. In the beginning, Quetzalcoatl joined his brother Tezcatlipoca in shaping the world. Together they lifted the heavens from the sea and divided the realms of light and shadow. But harmony between them was impossible for long. Tezcatlipoca's laughter always carried the scent of storm and war, while Quetzalcoatl's song sought the order of peace. When their rivalry reached its height, it tore the fabric of creation, each striking blows upon the other until the universe reshaped itself in response. Theirs was not hatred. It was the eternal tension between ideals, necessary and endless. When Quetzalcoatl ruled as king of Tolan, the city of wisdom and plenty, his reign was one of light. Under his guidance, the people learned music, craft, and ceremony. Blood sacrifice ceased, replaced by offerings of flowers, song, and prayer. The scent of copal filled the air instead of iron. It was an age of harmony, a brief miracle where beauty triumphed over fear. Yet even light casts a shadow, and in that shadow, Tezcatlipoca waited with his mirror. The fateful night of Quetzalcoatl's undoing began like any other, with the peaceful rhythm of drums echoing through the temples. Tezcatlipoca, disguised as an old man, came before the feathered serpent, bearing a cup of pulque. He told him it was a gift, a potion of strength and clarity. Quetzalcoatl, weary from the burden of godhood, drank. Sweetness turned to fire, and his mind swirled with visions of glory and despair. In the polished obsidian of Tezcatlipoca's mirror, he saw himself not as a god, but as a flawed being, vain, deceitful, unworthy of the perfection he sought. The god who had brought enlightenment now faced his own darkness. Consumed by shame, he fled the city that adored him, the music of Tolan fading in his wake. Some legends say he burned himself upon the eastern shore, his heart rising as the morning star. Others say he sailed upon a raft of serpents, vowing to return when the world was ready. Both stories end in transformation, for the Serpent of Light never truly dies. He sheds his skin only to be reborn. Quetzalcoatl's exile was more than departure. It was reflection. The Aztecs believed that gods, like men, were bound to cycles of error and renewal. Through his fall, he became a symbol of moral awakening, proof that even the divine must endure the pain of imperfection. To fall, in their eyes, was not defeat, it was purification. His sorrow was sacred because it taught restraint, compassion, and the humility required to create again. In later ages, his name became a song of longing. Priests told of his eventual return, when he would bring a new dawn free of suffering. The prophecy spread among both nobles and commoners that the feathered serpent would return from the east under the sign of Venus to restore balance. It was this vision that haunted the empire centuries later, when strangers arrived draped in steel and dust. Many wondered whether the old promise had come true or if the god's silence had been misunderstood. But such questions are the echoes of deeper fears, fears born from Quetzalcoatl's departure. To the people of Tenochtitlan, Quetzalcoatl was not only a figure of myth, but a guiding principle. His temples rose alongside those of more fearsome gods, proof that their faith was not rooted in cruelty alone. He represented creation through knowledge, not blood. Where Huitzilopochtli demanded war, Quetzalcoatl asked for wisdom. His feathered image, carved into stone and painted in gold, reminded the people that the divine could also be gentle. In his breath, the wind carried not commands, but inspiration. Yet perhaps his greatest gift to humankind came in the form of time itself. As Quetzalcoatl, Lord of the Morning Star, he measured the cycles of the heavens and gave structure to the calendar. Through him, the Aztecs learned to read the sacred count of days, to honor the rhythm of the cosmos. His knowledge transformed chaos into pattern, granting civilization the power to foresee and to remember. The feathered serpent did not rule through force, but through understanding of the great design. Still, every blessing he bestowed carried the weight of his absence. His followers believed that when he vanished, the world lost more than a god. It lost its conscience. Rituals became harsher, sacrifices grew darker, and the shadow of Tezcatlipoca deepened. Where once flowers bloomed upon the altars, blades began to gleam. The drums beat faster, louder, as if trying to summon back the harmony that had been broken. In this way, his absence became his legend's heartbeat, pulsing through generations like a prayer without words. There is an old saying among the descendants of the Mexica that those who forget Quetzalcoatl's lesson are doomed to repeat his exile. The feathered serpent's journey is a reminder that purity without compassion hardens into pride, and wisdom without humility turns to blindness. His fall is the world's mirror. It reflects not failure, but the courage to see one's flaws. For even the brightest light must learn to live beside its shadow. When one stands among the ruins of ancient cities and feels the wind sweep through broken temples, it is said that Quetzalcoatl moves with it still. He is the breath between the stones, the voice in the morning air that calls the sun to rise. His spirit is not gone. It changes form as all things do. And in that transformation lies his true divinity, to live, to fall, to rise again, each time closer to understanding. The feathered serpent remains, not as a lost deity, but as a rhythm within the human heart. Perhaps in the end, Quetzalcoatl's greatest power was empathy. Unlike gods of war or judgment, he saw divinity reflected in every mortal struggle. He understood that knowledge, love, and pain all flow from the same source, the desire to transcend. The Aztecs who whispered his name did not pray for victory, they prayed for wisdom. For in a world sustained by sacrifice, the feathered serpent offered something far rarer than fear: hope. The sun he helped ignite still burns, and though centuries have passed, its light carries the echo of his promise. In every dawn, Quetzalcoatl is reborn, his feathered body painted across the clouds. His myth is not a relic but a pulse, the eternal return of the luminous serpent who dared to fall, so that others might learn to rise. They say that when the gods weep, the earth blooms. In the heart of the Aztec world, no deity embodied this truth more profoundly than Tlaloc, the lord of rain and fertility. His name rolled off the tongue like the sound of falling water, his power felt in every droplet that kissed the land. He was the giver and the taker, the bringer of abundance and of ruin. To the people who depended on his grace, he was not simply a god, he was the pulse of itself. From the peaks of the mountains, where mist gathered like silver ribbons, Tlaloc ruled over his watery kingdom. There, amid clouds and thunder, he commanded his servants, the Tlalocs, small spirits who tended the sacred jars of rain. Each jar held a different kind of storm: gentle showers, nourishing drizzle, bitter hail, and furious lightning. When man angered him, he would break the wrong jar, spilling sorrow upon the fields. And when he was pleased, his tears descended softly, weaving life into the soil. The Aztecs believed that every rainstorm was his voice crying to the world, his laughter echoing in thunder. Tlaloc's duality made him both beloved and feared. To worship him was to walk the thin edge between gratitude and dread. The farmers of the valley prayed to him at dawn, offering maize and flowers while trembling at his darker moods. In the highlands, where the clouds gathered heavy and dark, children sang to the sky, begging for mercy from a god whose temper could flood even the temples built in his honor. He was a father who nourished his children and a spirit who punished neglect. The rain's rhythm mirrored the divine heartbeat, gentle, then fierce, always alive. Legends say that long before men rose from clay, Tlaloc married the goddess Calchiutlicue, the jade skirt, whose waters filled rivers and lakes. Together they formed the endless cycle of life. His storms struck the earth, and her currents carried the renewal that followed. But the harmony between them was fragile, easily broken by the cruelty of other gods. When Tezcatlipoca, ever the trickster, mocked Chalcutlicue's tears as deceit, she withdrew her love, unleashing a deluge that drowned the world. In grief, Tlaloc's rage shook the mountains, and from their union's ruin came the birth of the new age, the fifth sun. Thus, the story of creation was once again written with water and sorrow. Each year, the people of Tenochtitlan held great festivals in Tlaloc's name. They climbed to the summits of mountains, carrying offerings of bread and jade, whispering prayers into the fog. The priests adorned his altars with blue feathers and seashells, symbols of his domain. But his appetite for reverence was immense, and his thirst was not always quenched by simple gifts. When drought struck, when the rivers turned to dust, and the maize curled black under the sun, fearful hearts sought to appease him through sacrifice. Children, pure and untouched by sin, were chosen as messengers to his celestial lakes. Their tears, it was said, called down the rain faster than any prayer. It was a custom both sorrowful and sacred, a plea to a god who blurred the line between compassion and cruelty. To understand this ritual, one must see it not through modern eyes, but through the lens of the world the Aztecs inhabited. To them, life itself was a fragile loan granted by divine forces. Death in honor of a god was not loss, but return. The children offered to Tlaloc did not die. They transformed into the Tlalocs, joining the god in his realm to help pour the rains that sustained the earth. It was a faith built upon reciprocity, a constant exchange between life and the elements. In every storm, they heard the voices of the lost, laughing among the clouds. The mountain most sacred to Tlaloc was Mount Tlaloc itself, east of the great city. On its slopes stood a temple built not by mortal desire, but by necessity. The high priests painted themselves with blue clay and wore necklaces of jade to mirror their master's tears. As the sun rose behind them, they performed intricate rites, singing hymns that spoke of rivers and renewal. When the first drops began to fall, the people would kneel, faces lifted, mouths open to taste divinity. To be touched by Tlaloc's rain was to receive a blessing, a promise that the earth would breathe again. Yet Tlaloc's generosity could swiftly become wrath. The chronicles tell of seasons when he withheld his rains, testing the devotion of his followers. Fields cracked, rivers turned to mist, and the people's faith wavered like a dying flame. Temples filled with desperate prayers, offerings grew bolder, louder, darker. In those moments, Tlaloc became a symbol of the unpredictable heart of, reminding humankind that balance demands humility. His storms, both in heaven and in spirit, taught that gratitude must survive even in absence. His aspect was unlike that of other gods. He was often depicted with great fangs and round eyes encircled by turquoise rings. Lightning flashed from his hands, and his breath was the wind that carried the scent of rain. To the Aztecs, he was not beautiful in a human sense, but magnificent in essence, a being built from the chaos of the elements. Artists carved his image upon temple walls, their chisels seeking to capture the endless motion of clouds and rivers. Even in stone, his face seemed alive, as if the sky itself watched over the city. In the mythology of Mesoamerica, Tlaloc's roots extend deeper than the Aztec world, reaching older civilizations that revered him under different names. He was eternal, reshaping himself across ages, yet always returning as water's guardian. This continuity strengthened the people's bond with him. He was not a god distant in time, but one who flowed within their veins. Every drop of sweat, every tear, every river was his reflection. When children played in puddles after rain, elders said they were dancing in Tlaloc's laughter. He was also a keeper of doors between realms. The Aztecs believed that those who died by drowning or lightning were taken directly to his paradise, Tlalocan, a lush world of eternal spring. There, souls wandered through misty jungles and shining streams, free from pain or hunger. It was a place untouched by war, a reward for those chosen by the god himself. Unlike the fiery underworld that awaited most, Tlalocan was gentle, filled with the music of water. In the minds of the faithful, it was proof that even a fearsome deity could offer tenderness. But not all who entered Tlalocan did so willingly. Storms were his way of reclaiming lives, each bolt a reminder of the invisible hand that governs fate. Those who witnessed the destruction left by floods or heard the wailing winds knew that their God walked among them. They saw divinity not as comfort, but as truth, inevitable and raw. The rain that nourished also destroyed, proving that creation itself is sustained by cycles of death and rebirth. Through Tlaloc, the Aztecs acknowledged the vast, untamable will of, and their dependence upon it. When the Spanish chroniclers came, they marveled at the devotion surrounding the rain god. They could not comprehend a faith that revered both mercy and terror in one breath. But for the Mexica, Tlaloc's paradox was the essence of existence. He was life and death embodied, and to worship him was to embrace the whole of the world, not only its gentler parts. Even after conquest shattered the temples, his spirit remained in the storms over the valley, unbroken, humming his ancient songs. If one listens on a summer afternoon as thunder rolls across the mountains of Mexico, it is said his voice still murmurs between the clouds. The rhythm of rain against rooftops carries echoes of those long-vanished ceremonies. Each drop that strikes the ground is both gift and memory, a fragment of divine sorrow that keeps the world alive. The tears of Tlaloc have never ceased to fall, and within them lies the eternal promise that from grief, life always begins again. Beneath the high sun of the ancient valley, there once stood a goddess whose very body embodied the paradox of life and death. Her name was Coatlicue, the mother of serpents, and her image has endured in stone, in fear, and in awe. To gaze upon her was to confront the raw essence of existence, creation and destruction woven into a single, terrifying form. For the Aztecs, she was not merely the mother of gods, but the source of all that breathes, a force both nurturing and devouring. Her legend is one of pain turned divine, of endings disguised as beginnings. Coatlicue name means she of the serpent skirt, and her appearance was unlike any other goddess of the Mexica pantheon. Around her waist coiled twin snakes, symbols of fertility and regeneration. From her decapitated neck burst two more serpents, forming a living head through which blood itself became a face. Her hands were claws, her breasts sagged heavy with milk, and her limbs bore the marks of sacrifice. She wore a necklace of human hearts, bones and hands, tokens of the blood that sustained the gods. Yet within her monstrous grace lay the beauty of balance, death as the soil in which life takes root. In the mythic age, Coatlicue lived in solitude upon the sacred mountain Cotepec, sweeping its dust into swirling clouds. She was a mother abandoned by her offspring, forgotten by gods who once drew life from her womb. One day, as her broom scraped across the stone, a feather descended from the heavens, a quetzal feather so delicate it shimmered even in shadow. Moved by its beauty, Coatlicue tucked it against her breast. When she looked for it again, it was gone, and within her grew a child. Thus began the story of her most famous son, Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and war. When Coatlicue's pregnancy was revealed, her daughter Coyolxauhqui and her 400 brothers, the stars of the southern sky, were filled with rage and shame. They believed their mother had dishonored them with her mysterious conception. Armed and shining with celestial fury, they swore to kill her before the unwanted son could be born. Coatlicue, heavy with sorrow and dread, withdrew to the mountain's peak, clutching her belly as the thunder of her children's footsteps rose toward her. But within her womb, Huitzilopochtli whispered, promising deliverance. As dawn broke, the warriors of the stars surrounded their mother. Just as they raised their weapons, the mountain split open, and from its heart burst Huitzilopochtli, fully grown and radiant in armor of turquoise. In his right hand, he held the serpent of fire, Xiuhcoatl, a weapon of pure flame. The newborn god struck without hesitation, cutting down his siblings, his power like the first sun scattering the night. He decapitated Coyolxauhqui, casting her luminous head into the sky, where it became the moon. The rest of her body tumbled down the mountain, dismembered. The stars fled in terror, driven into darkness. And from that battle's end, the eternal struggle between day and night was born. For the Aztecs, this myth was more than a tale. It was the rhythm of cosmos itself. Each sunrise was Huitzilopochtli's renewed victory over his sister and her starry army. Each sunset was their brief revenge, the chase that would never end. And Coatlicue, the silent witness, remained the center of that cycle, the mother who births both light and shadow, forever mourning and creating. Her pain became the pulse of the universe, her sorrow the reason the heavens continue to turn. To stand before the statue of Coatlicue, even centuries later, is to feel that ancient pulse. Her sculpted form towers with terrible majesty, carved from black basalt and worn by time. At her feet coil serpents, her claws grip the earth, and her face, formed by two serpent heads, seems to look in every direction at once. Scholars and priests alike trembled before her image, unsure whether they beheld a goddess or a monster. The Aztecs saw no difference between the two. To them, beauty resided in truth, and truth in duality. Under her gaze, the illusions of kindness and cruelty dissolve until only existence remains. Coatlicue's shrine, once standing in the great city of Tenochtitlan, was a place of reverence tinged with fear. Here, offerings were made not in hope of mercy, but in recognition of necessity. Mothers prayed for safe births, warriors for courage, and priests for strength to accept fate's cruelty. Her worshippers understood that creation demands loss, that every seed must die in darkness before it cracks open into light. She was the womb of the world, and its grave, the endless turning of life into death into life again. The symbolism of serpents that adorned her body was not random. In Mesoamerican belief, snakes represented transformation, the shedding of skin as a metaphor for renewal. They were bridges between worlds, sliding across Earth yet born of the underworld. Coatlicue's skirt of serpents thus signified her dominion over all forms of change, the decay of flesh, the birth of stars, the movement of time itself. Her children might fear her, her worshippers might tremble before her, but none could exist without her. She was the mother of continuity. In darker legends, her isolation turned to bitterness. They say that after Huitzilopochtli's victory, she retreated into the mountains, her tears pooling into lakes and rivers. From those waters came both fertility and floods, blessings and destruction interwoven. Each rainstorm was said to echo her lament for the blood spilled by her children. When thunder cracked across the sky, it was her voice crying out for balance, for love and violence to become one. To the Aztecs, this divine grief explained the unpredictable temperament of itself. Even beyond her maternal role, Coatlicue symbolized the eternal feminine power that permeated existence. She was the spirit of the earth, the devourer of corpses, the mother who consumes her dead to nourish new life. Farmers offered the first harvest to her in silence, knowing that to give back to the earth was to acknowledge her endless hunger. Warriors who died in battle were said to return to her embrace, their blood mingling with hers beneath the soil. Death was never disappearance, it was a return to the mother of serpents. Her influence extended far beyond the temple walls. The Mexica viewed their own empire through her example, born from blood, sustained by sacrifice. Just as Coatlicue's pain gave birth to the sun, so too was their civilization maintained through offering and struggle. In every ritual sacrifice, they saw themselves reenacting the cosmic birth on Coatepec. The victim was not condemned, but exalted, returning to the mother to ensure the continuation of life. It was a worldview both brutal and profound, where compassion lived inside violence. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived and discovered her statue buried beneath Tenochtitlan's stones, they recoiled in horror. To them, she was a demon wrought in stone, an embodiment of savagery. Yet despite their efforts to erase her, she remained. Hidden underground, her face of serpents endured unbroken. She waits there still, not defeated but sleeping, the embodiment of survival. For gods born from the earth cannot be destroyed. They merely return to it until the world remembers their names. To speak of Coatlicue now is to remember that life's foundation is not gentleness but balance. She teaches that from fear emerges understanding, from pain comes birth, from endings sprout beginnings. The Aztecs did not worship her because she comforted them. They worshipped her because she made them face the truth that existence is a cycle of sacrifice and renewal. Her myth endures because it is threaded into the very fabric of being. Every volcano, every earthquake, every flower that pushes through soil speaks her language. In the quiet after a storm, when the sky clears and the earth smells of rain and stone, the essence of Coatlicue can still be felt. She is the whisper beneath the ground, the warmth that hums through seeds, the eternal reminder that destruction is not the opposite of creation, but its twin. The mother of serpents has never left. She lives wherever something dies so that something else might grow. And in the pulse of the world, her heart continues to beat, heavy with love, endless as time itself. From the moment the sun first rose upon the new world, war has never ceased in the heavens. The Aztecs believed that each dawn was a battle won, and each sunset a quiet retreat. For the sky itself was a battlefield, ruled by Huitzilopochtli, the blue hummingbird of the south, god of the sun and of war. To the Mexica, he was not merely a symbol of strength, but the very essence of survival. Without his victory, the world would be engulfed in darkness, forever consumed by the forces that sought to destroy it. Huitzilopochtli's story begins upon the sacred mountain of Coatepec, where his mother, Coatlicue, conceived him through divine mystery. His siblings, led by the moon goddess Coyolxauhqui, rose against her in rage, unwilling to accept the birth of a rival. But before their swords could strike, the mountain split open in fire. From its heart, Huitzilopochtli emerged fully armed, his body radiant with blue feathers, his face painted with the marks of destiny. In his hand shone Xiuhcoatl, the flaming serpent of the sun, a weapon forged from time itself. With a single blow, he struck down his sister, scattering her luminous body into the sky, where she became the moon. Thus, the eternal conflict between light and shadow began. From that divine act emerged his, the warrior who must fight constantly to preserve life. Huitzilopochtli was not a god of cruelty, but of necessity. Every day he traveled across the heavens, pursued by Coyolxauhqui and her star-born brothers. Each night they tore at him, devouring his light, and each dawn he rose again through sacrifice. To the Aztecs, his struggle mirrored their own existence, a fragile balance sustained by courage, discipline, and offering. Without blood, the sun would falter. Without honor, the cosmos would fall. In the heart of Tenochtitlan stood the Templo Mayor, the grand sanctuary where the Aztecs renewed the sun's strength through ritual. 2 stairways climbed its steep facade, one dedicated to Tlaloc, the bringer of rain, and the other to Huitzilopochtli, Lord of Fire. Each ascent symbolized the climb of the human spirit between nourishment and sacrifice, between sustenance and struggle. Upon the summit, offerings were made so that the god could continue his journey through the sky. The people believed that every drop spilled upon the stone was transformed into sunlight, fueling his eternal war. The rituals of Huitzilopochtli were not acts of despair, but of devotion. Warriors captured in battle were offered not as victims, but as chosen participants in the sustaining of the world. They were honored as those who would accompany the sun on his path through the heavens, their spirits reborn in the afterlife as hummingbirds, drinking the nectar of eternal flowers. For the Mexica, to die in Huitzilopochtli's service was to achieve glory beyond measure, a transformation from mortal to celestial. Through sacrifice, they ensured the universe's balance and the continuation of all life. The god's name itself holds layers of meaning. Huitzilopochtli, the left-handed hummingbird, the bird that flies toward the sun. In his paradox lies his mystery, a delicate creature symbolizing the fierceness of a burning star. The hummingbird, though small, never stops moving, beating its wings in a blur of light, much like the sun fighting each day to remain above the horizon. It was the perfect image of divine persistence. For the Aztecs, to live as Huitzilopochtli meant to embrace both fragility and power, to act with valor even in the face of inevitable death. Huitzilopochtli's domain was not confined to the sun alone. He was also the guardian of the Mexica people, their guide through exile and their herald of destiny. Legends say that during their wanderings through the valleys of Anahuac, it was his voice that commanded them forward, promising a home where an eagle would perch upon a cactus, devouring a serpent. This omen became Tenochtitlan, the city of divine prophecy, the heart of an empire born from faith and endurance. In every conquest and every victory, his presence was felt, not as greed, but as destiny fulfilled. To many outsiders, the Aztec devotion to Huitzilopochtli seemed cruel, their wars endless. Yet to those who lived within that faith, conflict was sacred rhythm. Life depended upon the struggle to maintain order against chaos, to honor the sacrifice through which existence itself was purchased. Every battlefield was an echo of the first divine war upon Coatepec, every warrior a symbol of the sun's flame cutting through night. Their courage was fuel for the god's ascent, their deaths a continuation of the celestial cycle. One of the most sacred of their rites was the Feast of Panquetzalistli, the raising of the banners, celebrated near the year's end. During this festival, warriors carried bright pennants through the city as chants and drums filled the air. The people danced from dawn until the final bleeding of the light, their bodies painted blue and gold, their spirits lifted to the rhythm of the sun's victory. As incense smoke curled into the sky, the temple steps became rivers of fire. For them, this celebration was not tragedy, but renewal, the reaffirmation that life's endurance demands offering. Huitzilopochtli's mythology carries weight far beyond its historical ritual. It reveals a profound philosophical truth, that the act of creation requires continuous effort against decay. The sun's battle is not simply symbolic, but existential. It is the reminder that every living being partakes in this cosmic war, through work, perseverance, and the will to move forward despite inevitable loss. In the universe of the Mexica, strength was not measured by domination, but by devotion, by the willingness to feed what sustains all. Even the Mexica leaders drew legitimacy from their alignment with Huitzilopochtli. They presented themselves as earthly reflections of the sun, responsible for maintaining his balance through governance and war. The empire expanded under this divine vision, guided by the belief that conquest itself was an act of cosmic duty. It was not merely empire building, it was the continuation of the sun's path through the heavens. Each victory was seen as a dawn, each defeat as a sunset, each ruler another manifestation of the god's eternal command. The symbols associated with Huitzilopochtli were profoundly vivid. The eagle, representing triumph, the serpent, embodying energy and transformation, and the blue, the color of the sky where he burned. His temples glittered with turquoise mosaics, his priests adorned themselves with feathers to mimic the flight of the bird. Even the drums of his rituals were said to echo thunder, the booming of his heart across the heavens. Every element in his worship carried the essence of motion and endurance, the certainty that stagnation is death. Yet among all these grand images, one aspect of Huitzilopochtli remains deeply human, the loneliness of eternal struggle. In the quiet after the sacrifices, when smoke drifted across the empty temple, priests would whisper prayers not of victory, but of gratitude. They understood that even gods tire, that even the sun must rest in darkness before it can rise again. Their devotion was not blind, it was conscious acknowledgement of fragility. Each morning, as the first light crept over the mountains, they believed they were witnessing his rebirth, proof that courage had not failed. Centuries may have buried the empire, but the sun still fights above the same mountains. In every sunrise, the story of Huitzilopochtli repeats itself, the triumph of light over darkness, of persistence over despair. The hummingbird still flits through gardens, wings shimmering like tiny suns, as if carrying his message through time. His legacy endures not as mythology alone, but as testament to the will to continue, no matter how endless the struggle may seem. Through him, the Aztecs found not fear, but meaning in the cyclical war that defines existence. For even in modern times, when we face our own nights and battles, the lesson of Huitzilopochtli whispers behind the dawn, to rise again, to burn brightly despite the darkness that awaits. The war of the sun is within everyone, the fight to preserve the light within our hearts, to keep creating in spite of destruction, to keep loving in spite of loss. That is the true essence of the blue hummingbird of the South, not destruction, but endurance born of eternal flame. In the silence that follows the last heartbeat, the Aztecs believed, the soul begins its journey downward. Not upward towards shining skies, but inward, through layers of earth and shadow, toward Mictlan, the kingdom beneath the dust. It was not a place of punishment or reward, but a realm of passage, a long farewell between life and the unknown. There, among mists and stones, waited Mictlantecutli, the skeletal lord of the dead, and his queen, Mictecacihuatl, the lady of the underworld. Together they ruled the cold halls, where every soul, noble or humble, must eventually arrive. Mictlan was more than a destination. It was a journey of endurance. The people of the Mexica spoke of 9 levels that every spirit must cross before reaching rest. Each level tested courage, patience, and remembrance of the heart's path. The dead were not judged for their deeds, but guided to release their attachment to life. Death, in the cosmology of the Aztecs, was not an enemy, it was a teacher. Through its trials, the soul became complete, purified of fear, ready to dissolve into the eternal cycle of existence. The first stage lay upon the surface, a long plain where cold winds swept endlessly. The soul, stripped of its body, shivered under the whispering breath of eternity. It was said that the departed would clutch a small token placed by loved ones, a jade bead or a seed of maize, to remind them of warmth and renewal. As they walked, the chill of death faded into acceptance, and the memories of sunlight gave them courage. So began the descent into the earth's heart. Next came the river Apanohuaya, wide and raging. No soul could cross it without aid. That was why, at burial, a loyal dog was sacrificed and buried beside the dead to guide them through the waters. The dog, usually yellow or red, knew its master's name and would carry them across upon its back, its fur gleaming in the dim light. Those who mistreated animals in life found themselves alone upon the riverbank, shouting into the current with no voice to answer. The compassion one had shown in life was the bridge one walked in death. Beyond the river stretched mountains that crashed together like jaws, closing and opening with thunderous rhythm. The soul had to slip between them without being crushed, finding the perfect moment to pass. These were the breaths of the Earth Mother herself, reminders that even in death, creation remained alive. The path between the mountains was narrow, and those burdened by regret often hesitated too long, trapped forever in the cycle of hesitation and fear. After the mountains came the obsidian fields, shimmering and deadly. Blades of black glass rose from the ground, cutting those who walked without focus. Here, Mictlantecutli tested the mind's clarity. The obsidian reflected illusions, faces from memory, lost loves, broken promises, tempting the traveler to linger or turn back. Only those who walked with calm acceptance could pass unscathed. The others descended again, swallowed by their own reflections. The fifth realm was the hill of obsidian smoke, where the air itself was thick and burning. Souls gasped and staggered, their lungs filling with the residue of their own deeds. To endure, they learned stillness, breathing not the air around them, but the truth within. It was said that after crossing the smoke, the voice of the living was forgotten. Those who passed emerged voiceless but wiser, stripped of the noise of the world. Then the path led through a place where arrows rained from unseen heights. The arrows were memories of harm caused and suffered, piercing the soul anew so that all wounds could be named before healing. Here, forgiveness was the only shield. Those who forgave themselves and others found the arrows passed through them like sunlight. Those who could not were stuck in endless pain, as if fighting battles long finished. Thus, peace became not an escape, but a surrender. The seventh region was a shifting desert, where the soul wandered beneath a black sky. Mountains loomed in the distance, but never approached, mirages of desire. Each traveler was confronted with their greatest longing, the one thing they could not let go. Some pursued it endlessly across the dunes, their forms dissolving into the sand. Others knelt, closed their eyes, and allowed the longing to fade. Only through relinquishment could they continue onward. Next came the place of the obsidian winds, so sharp they stripped flesh from bone. But the dead no longer felt pain. Instead, this stage was purification, the final shedding of identity. As the winds passed, all names, stories, and faces were carried away. The person who had been daughter, brother, warrior, or mother dissolved into pure essence. What remained was not an individual, but a spark of eternal being, glowing faintly amid the endless dusk. At last, the ninth and deepest realm, the still darkness of Mictlan proper. Here, under a ceiling of motionless stars, stood Mictlantecutli and Mictecacihuatl, skeletal yet regal, draped in jewels made from teeth and bones. They did not punish nor reward, they merely received. They offered the soul a single piece, the quiet of returning to the earth from which it came. In their gaze, all illusions vanished. The soul laid down its burdens and became part of the soil, the rivers, the air, the invisible breath that sustains the living. Mictlan was not hell, it was harmony. The Aztecs believed that to die well was to return willingly to the circle of life. The living honored their ancestors with offerings so that their spirits would remember joy even amid shadows. During the Feast of the Dead, the Mexica built altars adorned with flowers and food, believing that for a moment the spirits rose through the dust to share warmth once more. Death, for them, was not final separation, but periodic reunion. The boundary between the worlds was thin, crossed by memory and faith. Within this understanding lay a profound respect for mortality. Life was precious precisely because it was brief, a borrowed flame destined to return to the great fire. Priests reminded their people to live in balance, to cherish each grain of maize, each drop of water, each heartbeat. It was not fear of punishment that guided them, but awe for the fragile gift of being. The steps one took through life prepared the steps one would take through Mictlan. Even kings and warriors, garbed in gold and adorned with obsidian, could not escape this path. When they died, their treasures were buried beside them, not to carry power, but to symbolize surrender. All returned to dust, the rich and the poor alike, and from that dust spring flowers and storms and suns anew. In this way, Mictlan was not the end of the story, but the silence between breaths, allowing creation to begin again. Mictlantecutli himself embodied this equilibrium. His bones clacked like the rhythm of time, his grin neither kind nor cruel. He ruled not through terror, but presence, reminding all beings of their place within eternity. His consort, Mictecacihuatl, was the gentler face of death, the guardian of memory and song. Together they presided over the endless procession of spirits, their court an echoing reminder that love survives even in the depths of oblivion. Legends tell that Quetzalcoatl once journeyed to Mictlan to retrieve the bones of ancient humans after the last destruction of the world. Mictlantecutli tried to deceive him, setting traps and summoning winds to stop him, but the feathered serpent persevered. He carried the bones to the surface and, mixing them with his own blood, gave birth to humankind once again. Thus, even the god of life owed his creation to the god of death. Their dance, eternal and intertwined, was the heartbeat of existence itself. Today, when candles flicker in the quiet of a November night, the essence of Mictlan stirs once more. The smell of marigolds, the smoke of copal, the laughter of families remembering the departed, all carry echoes of that ancient pathway. The spirits walk unseen, guided by light, their footsteps soft upon the earth. In every offering, in every whispered name, the living repay the journey the dead have taken. The kingdom beneath the dust is not far away. It is beneath our feet, within our breath, in the pulse of time that connects all things. And so the wind continues to sigh through the valleys of Mexico, a voice between worlds. It rustles the cornfields and lifts a single whisper skyward. Nothing dies forever. Everything returns. Mictlan patiently awaits, not as a tomb, but as a passage home, for all who walk the fragile path between sunrise and silence. At the edge of every dying day, when the sun sinks toward the shadowed horizon, a guardian walks beside it, unseen but always present. His name is Xolotl, the god of twilight, of lightning, of monstrous grace. Twin brother to Quetzalcoatl, he is the reflection of what light must sacrifice to shine. In him lives the shadow of mercy, the strange beauty of deformity, and the compassion born from sorrow. While his radiant brother symbolizes creation and knowledge, Xolotl embodies endurance, the strength to guide souls through darkness and loss. The ancient Mexica said that when the gods gave birth to the fifth son, they demanded blood to move it through the heavens. But even among the divine, fear of death trembled. Xolotl, knowing the cost of creation, was chosen to die so that the Son might live. Yet his heart rebelled. Instead of accepting his fate, he fled across the worlds, shape-shifting to escape the sacrifice. First, he became a maize plant, hiding among the fields. Then an agave, its leaves sharp and trembling. Finally, he leapt into the water and turned into a creature that could breathe in the stillness between life and death, the axolotl. Through this final transformation, he found survival and compassion. In this form, Xolotl lingered between worlds, neither mortal nor god, neither dead nor alive. He became the reflection of the eternal dilemma, to serve by dying or to rebel by living. The Aztecs did not judge him for his refusal. Instead, they saw in him a mirror of human weakness and divine empathy. For in escaping death, Xolotl did not deny duty. He gave it meaning. He became the one who understood pain, who would later guide the souls of the dead through Mictlan's perilous journey, protecting them from despair. His defiance became his sacrifice, a vow to remain in dusk forever so others might find dawn. The axolotl, his earthly embodiment, was revered as a symbol of endurance and mystery. It lived in the deep lakes around ancient Tenochtitlan, breathing water yet holding the spirit of fire. The creature refused metamorphosis, remaining forever young, a reminder of Xolotl's arrested divinity. The priest said its eyes held the sorrow of a god who could not ascend, who chose to stay among mortals until the final night. Even today, its quiet gaze seems to carry that same melancholy, a watcher who remembers the time when gods wept thunder and the sky was not yet settled between day and night. In Aztec cosmology, Xolotl's duty stretched beyond his mythic flight. Each evening, he accompanied the sun as it descended into the underworld, lighting its way through the 9 levels of Mictlan. With his torch of lightning, he warded off the shades that sought to devour light, ensuring that Huitzilopochtli could rise once again at dawn. Without Xolotl's guidance, there would be no rebirth, only eternal darkness. He was the silent companion of the sun's death and the secret key to its resurrection. Yet in him also lived the god of lightning, the spark that cleaves heaven and earth. His storms were not the wrath of destruction, but the moment of divine illumination, the flash that bridges opposites. The Aztecs understood lightning as the instant where the heavens touched the soil, where spirit embraced matter, and Xolotl governed that brief union. His power was not sustained brilliance, but the beauty of sudden recognition. Through him, the unseen could become visible. Through him, the ordinary gained the shimmer of meaning. They said Xolotl stood at thresholds, the border between day and night, life and death, beauty and deformity. In every transition, his breath lingered. Those born with visible differences or physical scars were believed to be under his protection, touched by the god who defied perfection. His face, often depicted with the snout of a dog and eyes shaped like flames, was both fierce and tender. To the Aztecs, dogs were sacred intermediaries, capable of guiding souls across the river of the dead. Thus, Xolotl's dual image, as canine and as god, embodied the fidelity and courage needed to cross into the unknown. The people honored him, not with grand festivals, but with quiet offerings, left beside paths and bridges, places where one world shifted into another. A piece of bread, a carved figure of obsidian, or the whisper of a prayer was enough. Travelers invoked his name before journeys, for he was the patron of those who moved between dangers: migrants, warriors, healers, and the dying. When someone passed away, families would sometimes place a small effigy of a dog beside the body, asking Xolotl to accompany their loved one safely into Mictlan. In each act of remembrance, they affirmed his role as protector, not judge. Myths paint him as grotesque, even tragic, a god who fled sacrifice while the others embraced glory. But his story carries profound wisdom. Where Quetzalcoatl represents aspiration and transcendence, Xolotl reveals compassion for the imperfect, the lost, the afraid. He is the god who chooses to stay behind, so that no soul must walk alone. Within his supposed failure lies a deeper heroism, the courage to remain in shadow when others bask in light. Through him, humanity learned that there is no shame in sorrow, only truth. In the myth of the bones of creation, Xolotl again plays a vital part. When Quetzalcoatl descended into Mictlan to retrieve the remains of the previous humanity, it was Xolotl who guided him through the labyrinth beneath the earth. Together, they evaded traps and deceived the skeletal lord Mictlantecutli, carrying the sacred bones up to the surface. There, Quetzalcoatl bled upon them, giving birth to humankind. But it was Xolotl's courage, the patience of one who knows fear, that allowed the living to exist again. In this story, his loyalty became divine architecture, the blueprint for all acts of companionship. Sometimes Xolotl is seen in the evening star that follows his brother, Venus. As Quetzalcoatl rises in the dawn, Xolotl sets in twilight, closing the day's circle. Their celestial dance reminds those who watch that duality is harmony, that no sun can rise without a dusk to frame it. The Aztecs viewed the brothers as twin flames of existence, light and reflection, intellect and emotion, spirit and body. To revere only one was to forget half the truth. In the temples of Tenochtitlan, his images were rare but sacred. A few statues depicted him holding torches or carrying souls in his arms, his eyes watchful and mournful. The priests of Xolotl were healers of both the physical and the spiritual, tending to those who had fallen into despair or illness. They invoked his name when the rains grew violent, asking him to calm the storms he commanded. His lightning, they believed, could cleanse or consume depending on the heart of the one who faced it. To approach him required humility, the willingness to see beauty in imperfection, strength in gentleness. For the Aztecs, life's greatest terror was not death, but disconnection. Xolotl guarded against that fate. In fires that flickered between darkness and light, he dwelled as the unseen comforter. He was invoked when families buried their dead, when children were sick, or when warriors lay wounded beneath the stars. His presence was subtle, like the hush before rain, the glow of ember before the sun returns. To feel his nearness was to remember that no passage, however painful, is ever made alone. Even beyond myth, his lesson endures. The axolotl still breathes beneath the waters of Mexico's ancient lakes, a living echo of his myth. Scientists marvel at its capacity to regenerate limbs, to heal what was broken, to remain young through ages, a biological reflection of divine resilience. In that creature's unchanged gaze, one can almost see the spirit of Xolotl, unchanged by time, patient as water, eternal as dusk. To call him the god of monsters is to misunderstand his kindness. He encompasses what humanity tries to hide, the crooked, the uncertain, the sorrowful, and turns it into devotion. His existence teaches that divinity does not rest in flawless symmetry, but in empathy. Every scar, every hesitation, every act of quiet endurance is his temple. In the fading glow between sunset and night, he walks still, leading light into darkness and back again. When twilight falls and the wind carries the scent of rain, listen closely. In the rustle of leaves, in the soft growl of distant thunder, Xolotl moves. He walks beside the living as he walks with the dead, tireless, faithful, and unafraid of sorrow. His journey never ends because ours never does. In the eternal dusk between what was and what will be, he waits, holding the torch of lightning aloft to remind us that even in shadow, love still glows. When the last fires of harvest flickered and the wind began to cool, the Aztec world prepared for a night unlike any other, the Night of the Skulls. It was the time when the veil between Mictlan and the land of the living grew thin, when the ancestors returned in whispers and the temples glowed with the light of remembrance. The Mexica did not mourn this meeting of realms. They rejoiced in it. Death was not an end, but a passage, and on this sacred night, both sides of existence shared the same breath. In the great city of Tenochtitlan, preparations began days in advance. Altars rose in homes and temples alike, covered with offerings for the souls who would visit. Skulls carved of sugar or bone lined the steps of the Templo Mayor, gleaming beneath torches that danced in the dry wind. The scent of copal smoke mingled with flowers of cempasúchil, the sun-colored marigolds whose petals were said to guide spirits home. As night descended, the city became an ocean of flickering light, every flame a point of reunion between generations. The people told stories as they prepared their altars. Some spoke of Mictlantecutli, the Lord of Death, who smiled upon those who remembered their dead with joy rather than fear. Others whispered of Mictecatzihuatl, the Lady of the Underworld, who walked among the living on this night, her skeletal face painted with beauty, her eyes filled with peace. Children listened wide-eyed, clutching small candles, feeling no terror in these tales, only awe. For the Mexica had been taught from birth that death and life are twin rivers flowing to the same sea. As the first drums thundered, the festival began. The plaza erupted in song, dancers adorned in feathers and bones, moving like the spirits they sought to honor. Their steps echoed the rhythm of time itself, the heartbeat of all those who had lived before. From the rooftops came flutes and rattles, a chorus of remembrance rising into the starlit void. The city, vast and glittering, seemed to shimmer between worlds, its people embodying the truth that to celebrate death is to affirm life's eternity. Offerings filled the streets, fruit, tamales, cacao, and pulque, poured onto the earth as gifts. Families gathered to feast beside the graves of their ancestors, speaking softly as if in conversation. They laughed as they recalled tales of old mischiefs and songs once sung by the departed. To outsiders, it might have looked like revelry beside sorrow, but to those within it, the night pulsed with holiness. Every shared memory was a bridge across time, every smile a resurrection. At the heart of the celebration stood the tzompantli, the skull rack, glistening in firelight. Rows upon rows of skulls, once enemies, now symbols of cosmic renewal, reminded all that even death feeds the wheel of creation. The skulls grinned at the living as if to mock mortality itself, their hollow eyes gleaming with eternity. For the Aztecs, the skull was no trophy of conquest, but a symbol of continuity, a seed, not an end. Beneath the hum of drums and chants, the silence of their message endured. All who are born shall return, and from return comes being again. Within the Templo Mayor, high priests painted their faces with ash and bone dust. They carried torches up the temple's twin stairways, one toward Tlaloc, the god of rain, and the other to Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun. Their ascent mirrored the dual journey of the soul, descent into darkness and the promise of rebirth. At the summit, they offered flowers and food, not blood, for on this night the gods desired only remembrance. The heavens opened in stillness, and the torches' smoke drifted upward like prayers turned to stars. Elsewhere, families gathered in the courtyards to speak to the night. They placed photos, carved figures, or simple objects upon their altars. The favorite flute of a father, a lock of a child's hair, the woven cloth of a grandmother. Every object carried memory, every memory a fragment of eternity. When the wind stirred, they believed it was the spirit's breath passing by, tasting once more the world they left behind. Fear had no place here, for where love resides, death cannot conquer. As midnight came, storytellers took their places beside the temples. They spoke of ancient souls walking among the living, of warriors returning to watch over their descendants. One story told how the first skull spoke to the gods, begging that the living not forget the dead. The gods, moved by the plea, declared that once every year, the two worlds would meet beneath the marigold moon. Henceforth, the dead would bring fortune to those who remembered them, and sorrow to those who did not. Such tales were both myth and lore, binding the people to their ancestors in a circle unbreakable as the sun. and so they remembered. The city murmured with the voices of generations. Some claimed to see faint figures walking among them, shadows dressed in familiar forms, eyes glimmering with recognition. A child might reach out to grasp an unseen hand, and though it met only air, the warmth of belonging lingered. The boundaries of the world dissolved in those moments, life touching death like flame meeting shadow. In the quiet hours past midnight, the festival grew gentler. The drums slowed, the dance waned, and the fires dimmed to glowing embers. The people knelt, closing their eyes, whispering names like prayers. In that shared silence, they believed their ancestors stood among them, blessing the living in gratitude for remembrance. The tears shed were not of grief, but of connection, an offering of the heart as sacred as incense. The Night of the Skulls was not about endings, it was about reunion. High on the temple steps, the priests recited a final invocation. They thanked death for its patience, life for its persistence, and the gods for the bridge that united them. As dawn approached, a pale light began to creep into the sky, and the marigold petals scattered along the streets shimmered in gold. The souls of the dead, their visit complete, turned once more toward Mictlan, carrying with them the warmth of living prayers. The living rose to greet the sun, knowing that their turn to cross that bridge would come as natural as the wind's return each morning. This night, the Aztecs believed, reminded the universe of its rhythm, the eternal cycle of return. To forget the dead would be to break that cycle, to silence the heart of creation itself. But as long as light met shadow and memory met love, the world would endure. The sun would rise, as it always had, on a people unafraid to walk beside their ancestors. And though the skulls would return to their slumber, their silent smiles would remain, carved forever on the face of existence. In the echo of the drums and the scent of fading flowers, the truth lingered. The Night of the Skulls was never a mourning for those lost. It was a celebration of the bond unbroken by time. Beneath the same sky walked the living and the dead, both sustained by the same breath, both children of the same sun. And as the first rays of dawn pierced the horizon, the people of Tenochtitlan whispered their final prayer to the retreating spirits. Travel safely, beloved ones. The gates will open again when the year turns, and your path, marked by petals and memory, will lead you home once more. Translate. In the sacred heart of Tenochtitlan, where the twin temples reached toward the heavens, there existed a chamber rarely entered by mortal eyes. Within its walls, covered in obsidian and gold, the high priests of the Mexica gathered to interpret the movements of stars and the whispers of gods. They called themselves the Keepers of Cycles, the guardians of time itself. By torchlight, they recorded visions upon codices of bark and deerskin, their fingers stained with the ink of soot and blood. These writings became the lost prophecies of the priests, words that foretold not merely the fate of an empire, but the pulse of the cosmos. Each prophecy was born from a sacred rhythm, linked to the calendar that governed both stars and men. The Aztec world revolved around two great counts, the Xiuhpohualli, the solar year, and the Tonalpohualli, the ritual cycle of days. When these two wheels met, a single thread of destiny emerged, weaving patterns visible only to those trained to see beyond time. The priests believed that within these alignments lay omens, portents of birth, destruction, and renewal. They did not fear these revelations. They revered them as the true heartbeat of existence. In one fragment recovered centuries later, the priests wrote of a vision seen upon a night when the moon wept fire and the lake below reflected crimson. On that day, the scroll said, a serpent of silver shall fall from the sky, and the faces of the gods shall turn away. The temple will tremble, the sun will flicker, and the men of maize will forget their songs. Many believed this prophecy spoke of drought or plague. Yet others whispered it was the foretelling of something far greater, the end of their empire and the arrival of strangers draped in metal and shadow. Translate. In their twilight hours, the keepers of the calendar began to read the world with trembling hearts. The stars that once sang in harmony now danced in strange patterns. Eclipses darkened the heavens at irregular times, and the sacred fires burned with smoke that would not clear. These were signs that the age of the fifth sun, the world of their own making, was nearing its end. Every empire they knew rode upon the breath of cosmic cycles. The gods who had lifted them would one day unmake them, just as they had unmade the suns before. One of the most enigmatic prophets of this era was the astrologer and priest Tlacaelel, often said to whisper directly with Huitzilopochtli himself. He taught that destruction was merely transformation, that to resist fate was to defy purpose. Under his guidance, the rituals grew more fervent, the sacrifices ceaseless. He believed that only through devotion and blood could the sun continue to rise. Yet even in his certainty, he inscribed warnings upon tablets of clay, that when the tears of Tlaloc fall without prayer and the hummingbird god ceases to sing, the fifth sun would falter and die. As they studied the heavens, the high priests also recorded dreams upon thin manuscripts, visions that came in flashes of lightning or the weight of silence. In one dream, they saw a river of obsidian cutting through the sky, its current filled with skulls bearing unknown faces. In another, a white mist covered the valley, and from it walked beings with pale skin and burning eyes, carrying weapons that spat thunder. The priests debated endlessly whether these were symbols or truths. Some dismissed them as warnings from Tezcatlipoca, the trickster god, whose mirror often showed men what they feared most. Others bowed before these visions, believing them gifts of foresight. Translate. Amid those debates, hope remained. Prophecy was not doom. It was dialogue between mortals and forces beyond comprehension. The codices told not only of destruction, but of renewal, that after darkness would rise another world, another sun, luminous and unbroken. The priests did not know if they or their descendants would live to see it, but they recorded the vision nonetheless. "The serpent shall return," one verse read, "and light shall come from beneath the ashes of sorrow." Some believed this spoke of Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, destined to rise when the world had forgotten the gentle ways of wisdom. Among these writings were 4 symbols said to represent the ends of the previous ages: jaguar, wind, fire, and flood. The fifth sun, the current era of movement, was governed by both creation and sacrifice. The priests feared that the gods' appetite could no longer be sated, that the balance between giving and taking had been lost. They saw omens everywhere: lightning striking temples, comets cutting through the night sky, and blood turning black upon the altars. Itself seemed restless. The mountains rumbled as if remembering ancient pain. It was during one such omen, a comet blazing from west to east, that an unnamed priest recorded his final vision. "A shadow clothed in brilliance shall come from the sea," he wrote. "It will not speak our tongue, yet the world will listen. Our temples will fall, our names will fade, yet the gods will not die. They will sleep within the dust, waiting to rise anew." These words echo through time like a lament wrapped in serenity. He knew that no prophecy could prevent what must be. His duty was not to stop the turning of the cycle, but to witness it with open eyes. Nigh. Translate. Unable to change destiny, the priests took measures to preserve the sacred records. Some codices they hid within stone walls, others they buried beneath volcanoes, sealed with salt and prayer. They believed that someday, when the new world forgot their stories, the earth would unveil them again. Knowledge to them was not possession, but offering. To leave behind prophecy was to seed the future with memory, ensuring that truth could never truly be extinguished. The loss of those manuscripts after the conquest became its own fulfillment of prophecy. Fire consumed the codices, and silence devoured centuries of devotion. Yet even as the written words vanished, their essence persisted in legend and code, in the rhythm of heartbeats and the whisper of the wind. The priests had always known this would occur. They had predicted their own erasure. In doing so, they guaranteed that their memory could not be wholly lost. For what is foretold cannot truly die. It waits, coiled within the human spirit, until it is spoken again. Modern scholars would later speak of coincidence, of patterns in celestial motion, of superstition turned to poetry. But those ancient priests would smile at such explanations. For them, faith and knowledge were not enemies, but mirrors reflecting one another. To read the stars was to read the mind of the divine, and to write prophecy was to write one's own soul. In that, they achieved a kind of immortality far beyond the empires they served. Translate. As night still falls over the valley where Tenochtitlan once stood, one can almost imagine their voices rising through the mist. They hum old prayers to a sky they still trust, tracing constellations with invisible hands, their eyes fixed on the same stars that foretold both glory and ruin. Perhaps they continue to whisper, urging the living to remember that all ages turn in harmony, that every collapse holds the seed of creation. For the priests never intended prophecy to be a warning. It was a reminder that the universe, like life itself, is both fleeting and eternal. The lost prophecies of the priests remain not in books, but in the rhythm of rebirth. Each sunrise over the ancient lake is a fragment of their foresight made manifest, a voice saying, "The world ends, the world begins." And as the wind carries the scent of burning copal across the ruins, it almost seems to murmur their final vow, a promise kept across 5 suns, that nothing divine ever truly vanishes. It only changes its form, waiting for the next dawn to be reborn in light once more. There came a day when the temples no longer echoed with drums, when no incense rose to the heavens, and the sacred fires turned to smoke and ash. The songs that once bridged the living and the divine were drowned beneath the thunder of foreign boots. The empire that believed itself eternal watched its gods fade from the sky, not with thunder and flame, but with silence. This was the twilight of the Mexica world, the day the gods fell silent, not by death, but by forgetting. And in that silence, the hearts of a people trembled between memory and ruin. It began with a prophecy misunderstood. The priests had long whispered of Quetzalcoatl's return, a god of light who would come from the east bearing wisdom. When the strangers arrived upon shimmering ships, clad in armor that gleamed like the scales of serpents, many saw in them the fulfillment of that ancient word. But what came ashore was not divinity, it was ambiguity, an ending disguised as revelation. The Mexica greeted them with gifts and awe, unaware that the old gods were about to face a final test, not of faith, but of endurance. The meeting between worlds was neither peace nor war. It was confusion made flesh. The foreigners brought fire beyond understanding, weapons that thundered like the wrath of Tezcatlipoca, and beasts unknown, who carried men as if floating above the ground. The air filled with smoke and disbelief. The Aztecs struggled to fit this vision into their universe of symbols, seeking meaning within pattern. Perhaps this was judgment, perhaps renewal. Whatever it was, it carried the cold weight of inevitability. When the battles began, the silence of the gods deepened. The priests cried out in the temples, offering sacrifices to Huitzilopochtli for victory, to Tlaloc for mercy, to Coatlicue for protection. Yet no omens came. The skies remained indifferent. The obsidian mirrors showed only smoke. To those who had lived their lives in certainty that all things beat in rhythm with the divine, that stillness was unbearable. Had the gods turned their faces away? Or were they waiting, unblinking, beyond the ruin their children had summoned? Across the valley, the sacred city of Tenochtitlan fought like a living thing refusing to die. Warriors painted in blue and black defended the causeways, their cries echoing the names of gods no longer answering. Even as famine gripped the people and the lake turned red with blood, the Mexica refused surrender. In their hearts beat the rhythm of Huitzilopochtli, the eternal warrior sun. They believed that if they fought until the last breath, the gods might yet awaken and turn the tide. But dawn after dawn, the horizon stayed silent. When the temples were finally breached, when the great idols were cast down and broken, the city fell into a grief older than memory. The conquerors tore the hearts from the stone gods and planted their own crosses upon the ruins. Yet even in defeat, there were those who whispered prayers in secret, their lips trembling with the old names: Tlaloc, Xolotl, Quetzalcoatl. They hid small idols beneath the floorboards and in the cracks of walls, believing that as long as one whisper remained, the divine would not wholly vanish. For the Mexica, gods were not distant rulers, they were companions, living forces woven into the fabric of daily life. To lose them was to lose meaning itself. Crops withered not only from neglect, but from despair, as though the earth itself mourned the silencing of sacred words. Children grew up in a world where the old songs had no place, where the stars no longer told stories, and time no longer turned in the familiar wheel of suns. The fifth sun still rose, but its light felt colder, detached, a sky mourning the voices it had once carried. Yet silence has its lessons. In that void of prayer and sound, a different understanding began to bloom. The few remaining priests, stripped of their temples, became wanderers and teachers in disguise. They spoke gently of the gods as dreams, not gone, but sleeping within every stone, every pulse, every word that refused to die. They told their listeners that the divine does not cease, it changes shape. Though altars crumble, the essence remains, carried in memory and story. Faith itself became rebellion, secrecy became preservation. In the remote villages of the mountains, rituals survived as whispers. The festivals once held for Tlaloc turned into prayers for rain, now addressed to new saints whose faces bore uncanny resemblances to the old gods. The weavers still wove serpents into their textiles. The farmers still offered corn to unseen watchers in the soil. The conquerors saw devotion to their own heavens, but beneath the hymns, the Mexica kept their own music alive. The gods had not been silenced. They had learned to speak in hidden tongues. Legends tell of nights when old priests gathered in the deserts beyond sight of the city's fires. There, beneath the full moon, they lit small fires of copal and maize. The flames, they said, carried messages to the sleeping gods, calling them by their secret names. Sometimes, when the air grew still, those gathered claimed to feel a tremor beneath their feet, as though the serpent Coatlicue stirred within the earth. The silence of the gods in those moments felt less like absence and more like breath drawn before awakening. The new world rose upon the bones of the old, yet the two never truly separated. Churches stood where temples once did, but their foundations hummed with buried energy. The stones remembered. Beneath every altar, beneath every cross of carved wood, the dust of the old gods watched and waited. The Mexica had always understood that divinity thrives in cycles, that death feeds rebirth, and silence precedes song. The gods were not gone. They were merely learning the patience of time. For generations afterward, the people of the valley would tell their children to listen during storms. They said that when thunder rolled across the mountains, it was not the wrath of a foreign deity, but the laughter of Tlaloc returning in disguise. When lightning struck the lakes, it was Xolotl lighting his torch once more. And when the hummingbird hovered at dawn, its wings trembling with unseen energy, it was Huitzilopochtli reminding the world that the sun still battles on. Though the names may change, the spirits endure in all that lives. The day the gods fell silent, then, was not truly an ending. It was a transformation, painful and misunderstood. Silence is often mistaken for death, but in it lies the promise of rebirth, a pause before the next sound. For the Aztec spirit, the divine could not be extinguished. It could only be forgotten temporarily by those too busy to listen. And when the time comes again for humanity to look toward the sun with reverence rather than ownership, perhaps those ancient voices will once more be heard in the wind. In the ruins of the Templo Mayor, archaeologists unearthed offerings buried centuries ago. Shells from distant coasts, jade carved into serpents, obsidian mirrors still glinting faintly in darkness. These were not relics of superstition. They were messages. Silent prayers preserved in matter, waiting. The gods were never idols. They were ideals of balance, sacrifice, and communion with the cosmos. Even buried under conquest, they endured, patient as mountains, eternal as dawn. And perhaps that is where the greatest truth lies. The Mexica did not lose their gods. They became them in endurance. Every act of survival, every story told in defiance, was an offering more precious than blood. The gods born from human sacrifice were fed, finally, by human resilience. Their temples might have fallen, their language might have been stolen, but their essence remained in every rhythm of life that refused despair. In silence, divinity learned how to listen. Even now, when one stands among the ruins of the old capital and feels the breeze whisper through broken stone, there is an echo that no history can erase. It is the murmur of a forgotten prayer, the faint heartbeat of a world once filled with song. The silence of the gods was never void. It was seed. And though their voices have faded, their presence endures in the pulse of the sun, in the rhythm of earth, and in the quiet courage of all who remember. Beneath the modern streets and fading memories of Mexico City lies another world, buried under centuries of dust and silence. The stones of ancient Tenochtitlan still breathe beneath the earth, hidden yet alive. The great pyramid that once pierced the heavens, El Templo Mayor, now sleeps beneath the shadows of cathedrals and concrete, its heart still beating faintly with the rhythm of forgotten prayers. To descend into those ruins is to step backward through time, to hear echoes of chants that once commanded the sun itself to rise. The story of the pyramid is not merely one of architecture, but of belief made solid in stone. It was built where legend says the Mexica saw an eagle perched upon a cactus, devouring a serpent, a divine sign that marked the center of the world. Here, they raised their temple not as a monument to power, but as a bridge between realms. One stairway leading to Huitzilopochtli, god of war and the sun, the other to Tlaloc, lord of rain and fertility. Between them stretched a delicate balance, the fire and the water, the heartbeat of creation. To climb its steps was to walk a path through the cosmos. In its prime, the Templo Mayor towered above the city like a mountain forged by human hands. Its terraces gleamed with lime and red pigment, symbolizing blood and life, and its steps were slick with offerings to the gods. Priests adorned in feathers and obsidian masks ascended in procession, their chants rippling across the lake as drums thundered like approaching storms. For the Mexica, those sounds were not of violence, but of harmony. They echoed the agreement between men and gods, the acknowledgement that life demanded constant renewal. What others might call sacrifice, they called balance. But time is unrelenting even to gods made of stone. When the world of the Mexica fell, the conquerors sought to erase the memory of what stood beneath their feet. The Great Pyramid was torn apart block by block, its bones repurposed to build the cathedral that still stands over it. The new faith demanded silence from the old voices, yet foundations, even sacred ones, do not die so easily. Beneath the cathedral's golden domes, the whisper of the pyramid never ceased. Stones remember. And sometimes when the wind trembles just right, they whisper back. Centuries later, when the city began to modernize, the earth revealed what history had tried to bury. In the year 1978, a group of workers digging near the cathedral struck something solid. As they cleared away the dirt, the face of a massive stone disc emerged, the image of Coyolxauhqui, the moon goddess, shattered and eternal. The discovery cracked open the surface of time, and from it surged the buried world of Tenochtitlan. Layer by layer, archaeologists uncovered altars, offerings, idols, and tunnels that wound like veins beneath the city. The gods had slept, but not forgotten themselves. To walk through the excavated ruins now is to feel specters brush past your skin. The stone steps, carved for divine ascent, seem to hum with invisible energy. Offerings recovered from the depths tell stories of faith and sacrifice. Obsidian blades, shells from distant oceans, jade beads and skulls that once gazed upon the stars. Each object, placed with care, was a promise, a conversation with something beyond human understanding. The objects outlasted their makers, holding in their stillness the echo of the people's devotion. Scholars study these relics as artifacts, but to those attuned to their deeper resonance, they are messages. They speak of how the Mexica viewed their universe not as empty matter, but as a living network of energies and obligations. The pyramid represented more than a structure. It was a map of existence, each level reflecting a cosmic layer, each offering aligning earth with heaven. Even the blood spilled upon its steps was not meaningless violence, but sacred continuity, ensuring that the cycle of life would not fracture. The echo beneath the pyramid is not of death, it is of persistence. Within the reconstructed layers of the Templo Maya, archaeologists found the remains of many previous temples, each built upon the ruins of the last. There were 7 in total, rising like successive generations of memory, each new empire honoring and reshaping the old. This rebuilding was no accident, it was ritual. The Aztecs believed that the world itself had been born and reborn through cycles, and their temple mirrored that eternal pattern. To renew the house of the gods was to reawaken creation itself. Every stone laid was an invocation of time's circular dance. And yet, beneath all those layers lies something older still, something the Mexica themselves built upon. Before their rise, earlier civilizations, Toltecs, Teotihuacanos, perhaps even those nameless peoples of myth, raised sacred hills and pyramids to reach toward the divine. The Templo Maya was their inheritor, a culmination of centuries of seeking the center of the universe. It was at once a continuation and a transformation, the voice of many ages speaking through one grand structure. To stand before it was to face eternity, to feel the gaze of countless generations upon you. Even as centuries changed the world above, the underground chambers kept their vigil. Offerings placed there centuries ago remain untouched, guarded by darkness and the weight of faith. In one chamber, archaeologists discovered the skeletons of eagles and jaguars, symbols of the sun and the night. In another, they found miniature figures of warriors, frozen mid-battle, a world of clay replicating the cosmic struggle. Perhaps the priests believed that by recreating the divine within the earth, they could keep it alive forever. In many ways, they succeeded. The modern city hums with electricity and chaos where drums once sounded, yet the same sun still rises over the lake's old basin. The same wind moves through the alleys, and beneath the ground, the ancient stones remain. People walk unknowingly above the temple that once dictated the rhythm of their ancestors' lives. But every tremor, every crack in the pavement feels like a heartbeat beneath their progress. The earth remembers even when the mind forgets. The gods wait where they always have, beneath our feet, beneath our consciousness. What visitors see now at the Templo Maya is only a fragment of what once was, an exposed vein of memory. The stones that remain are surrounded by glass and light, studied by scholars and tourists who peer into a past both foreign and intimate. Yet the true power of the place is not found in its stones, but in its silence. Standing there as the sun sets beyond modern towers, one can almost sense the presence of the old gods, not as beings demanding blood, but as witnesses to endurance. They have watched cities rise and fall, names change and faiths evolve, yet still they wait, patient as the earth itself. The echoes beneath the pyramid remind us that destruction never erases, it only transforms. The gods who once drank blood through stone altars now draw vitality from remembrance. The people who built Tenochtitlan believed that to honor the past was to breathe life into the present, and even today, that truth hums below the surface. The offerings unearthed are not mere remnants, they are reminders. voices from a time when humanity understood that to build was also to dream. When night falls over the ruins and the lights of the city shimmer above, the contrast becomes a living metaphor. Above ground, the world rushes forward, consumed by motion and noise. Below, ancient silence radiates, a presence steady as time. Between the two lies the fragile link that sustains all memory. The Mexica built their pyramid to stand at the center of the world, but perhaps they also built it to remind the world that divinity begins where remembrance does not end. The echoes continue, subtle but relentless, weaving through the hum of the city. They are felt more than heard, the faint vibration in the earth when footsteps pass over buried stone, the soft murmur of wind through narrow streets that follow ancient canals. The pyramid does not call for worship, it calls for listening. Its stones whisper across centuries, asking only that we remember the truth the Aztecs lived by, that time is a circle, that life and death are entwined, and that nothing sacred is ever truly lost. Standing at the edge of the excavation today, as daylight fades and the city lights ignite, one feels the union of past and present. The skyscrapers glow, yet somewhere beneath them lies the pulse of a civilization that refused to vanish. The gods of the Mexica no longer rule from altars, but they still dwell in stone and story, in the persistence of memory. They have become the heartbeat of the land itself, a murmur beneath the modern symphony. And if one stands still enough, breath held against the noise of the century. Those echoes rise once more, carrying the voice of the old world into the new. In the heart of the legend, where memory and prophecy intertwine, the feathered serpent waits to return. Quetzalcoatl, the god of creation and renewal, never vanished completely. His story, whispered through centuries of conquest and silence, lives in wind and feather, in the breath of dawn that touches the mountains of Mexico. The Aztecs believed his promise was eternal, that one day, when the world had forgotten the rhythm of sacrifice and the balance of light, he would rise again from the east, bringing wisdom instead of war. The legend tells that when Quetzalcoatl left the world of men, he walked toward the horizon weeping, his tears turning into jade upon the sand. Cloaked in sorrow, he crossed the sea on a raft of serpents, promising to return when the world shrouded itself in darkness. For generations, the Mexica gazed toward the sunrise, watching for the sign of his descent, the morning star, Venus, glowing like a herald of renewal. His return would not be of thunder or flame, but of awakening. He would come when mankind remembered the quiet language of harmony. When the strangers from the east arrived centuries later, many believed the prophecy had been fulfilled. The ships that glimmered upon the horizon seemed like divine serpents upon the water, and their leader's armor reflected the sun like sacred fire. For a brief moment, hope and confusion merged, and the ancient words took new shape. But what came that day was not Quetzalcoatl's gentle wisdom. It was the shadow of misunderstanding, a collision between prophecy and ambition. The serpent had not returned. It had been reborn within the hearts of those still listening. Quetzalcoatl, in truth, was never a god bound by time or flesh. He was an idea, an echo of balance between heaven and earth. Feather and serpent, the duality of creation itself. The feathers signified ascension, the heavens, and transcendence, while the serpent represented grounding, fertility, and flesh. Together they formed the axis of existence, the harmony between intellect and instinct. His return, therefore, would not be the coming of a being, but the return of understanding, that to rise, one must also remain rooted. The image of Quetzalcoatl endured across ages, carried in secret through myths disguised as prayers. During the years of conquest and silence, stories of him became fragile embers passed from tongue to tongue. Elders told their children that the feathered serpent slept beneath the mountains, coiled within the veins of the earth, waiting for the world to remember his name. When storms came, they said it was his breath stirring, cleansing the sky of hatred and fear. When the sun rose, They saw in its fire the promise that no age of darkness could last forever. Even now, among the remnants of the old empire, symbols of the god remain, etched upon stone, carved into temples, hidden in the patterns of textiles. In these details live the fragments of his promise, an unending dialogue between humanity and divinity. Each feather found in the dust, each serpent carved in jade, becomes a message sent across time. The return of the feathered serpent is not an arrival, it is a remembering. For the Aztecs, memory was resurrection, and myth was a mirror where truth revealed itself slowly, patiently, as dawn reveals the world from shadow. The modern age has buried much of what the Mexica held sacred, yet their wisdom endures in unexpected ways. The idea of Quetzalcoatl as a bearer of peace and knowledge still finds resonance in hearts that crave balance in chaos. Some say his spirit manifests whenever humans choose understanding over conquest, compassion over fear. In every artist seeking beauty, in every leader striving for justice, in every voice that dares to speak truth, there lives a fragment of the feathered serpent's light. His prophecy was never about return from the sea, but about awakening within the soul. In ancient temples, his image was often depicted with wide, knowing eyes and lips that seemed on the verge of speech. To stare into them now is to feel as though the stone itself listens. Perhaps it waits for the question humanity has long forgotten to ask. How does one live in harmony with all that exists? The Aztecs built their world around the answer. They understood that divinity was not separate from existence, but interwoven through it. Every grain of maize, every drop of rain, every heart that beats carries the echo of the gods. Perhaps that is why Quetzalcoatl chose to be both mortal and divine, serpent and bird. He represents the unity that modernity still searches for. The story of his downfall remains vital to his return. Deceived by Tezcatlipoca, the god of the smoking mirror, Quetzalcoatl faced his reflection and saw weakness, pride, and sorrow. He realized that perfection was an illusion, that even gods must fall to learn compassion. His exile was both punishment and purification, a journey through humility toward wisdom. Thus, when he returns, it is not as a triumphant conqueror, but as a quiet teacher, one who knows that light without shadow is blind. His return demands that humanity too see itself clearly, accept its flaws, and begin again. There is a legend told among descendants of the Mexica that at the world's rebirth, a great serpent will rise not from the sea, but from within the earth itself. It will not devour, but awaken, unfurling its wings across the sky. Its feathers will glitter with the reflections of every soul that remembers kindness. When people look upon it, they will see their own hearts mirrored there, and they will understand that the gods never abandoned them. They only waited for mankind to become divine once more through empathy and memory. The return of the feathered serpent will be the return of balance. To imagine that moment is to feel the pulse of the earth slow and steady beneath one's feet. The same energy that fueled empires still hums below the surface of cities, rivers, and dreams. The old gods have not vanished. They have transformed into currents of inspiration, awaiting recognition. The pyramid may be rubble, the temple's gone, but belief is not built of stone. It resides wherever the human spirit dares to lift its gaze beyond itself. Quetzalcoatl's song is the wind pressing through leaves, the whisper of history urging us to remember what we once knew instinctively, that creation and compassion are the twin forces of survival. When dawn breaks over the Valley of Mexico and the light touches the ruins of Tenochtitlan, something ancient stirs. The air feels lighter, as if the weight of centuries lifts for one brief moment. In that golden breath of morning lies the echo of his wings. The feathered serpent still rises with the sun, watching over a world both changed and the same. His prophecy was fulfilled not through conquest, but through persistence, the endurance of memory against all erasure. In remembering him, humanity remembers itself. So the question remains, when will his return truly come? Perhaps it is already happening. For every act of kindness reborn in darkness, for every person who chooses creation over destruction, The feathered serpent moves a little closer to the horizon. His return is not a single moment, but an awakening spread across time. It happens each time eyes open to the wonder of existence, each time hearts recall that everything living deserves honor. The gods do not return by stepping from the sea. They return through us. In the silence after night's last star fades, if one listens carefully, a faint rustling can be heard. It is not the wind, but the movement of feathers stirring above ancient stones. The feathered serpent breathes in rhythm with the earth, his spirit woven through generations that refuse to forget. He does not come to rule, but to remind, to whisper that wisdom lies in balance, that divinity is simply awareness, and that all endings are beginnings once more. And when the dawn comes burning gold and alive, the world, for an instant, remembers him fully, the God of light and shadow, creation and mercy, forever returning, forever awake.